Welcome to BSE Talks, where we talk about everything in love, Black, and theater. And here's my special guest today, Mr. Michael Harrell. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much. We are just going to get right into it, talk about some career things, and see where we end up with. Now, first, Michael, I want to ask, how do you identify as far as your career? Like, what are all of your multi-hyphenates? Let everyone know, please.
Wow. Well, technically everywhere from costume design, pattern maker, tailor, sewer, stitcher, fitter, if that's such a word. I cover a few bases.
Stylist probably too?
Oh, stylist has been in there actually, yes it has.
And probably wardrobe, shopping
yes.
for wardrobe a lot?
I've done shopping, and yes, I've done wardrobe. Actually, I did wardrobe this weekend for Anderson Paak, actually.
Nice.
The wardrobe's in there as well.
How long have you been in the business, Michael?
Well, I've been in theater on Broadway for 24 years. Wow. I've been in Broadway for 24 years, which is kind of unheard of for a Black man to be in one position on Broadway for 24 years. That's relatively unheard of, so I'm very fortunate as far as that's concerned. I have been in different shows over the 24 years, but I pretty much do the same thing in all the shows that I'm booked in.
So you've not only worked in theater, what are some of the avenues and shows and people that people might recognize that you've worked with?
Well, aside from theater, I've also done a lot of live performance, pop tours, and things like that. So before I got into theater, which is where the celebrity styling came in, my first large client was Patti LaBelle. So of course that opened so many doors, and I was in places I only dreamed about. You know, I was at the Grammys, I was at MTV, I was all these award shows I only dreamed about. So from Patti LaBelle, then I did Luther Vandross, and on the Luther Vandross tour, I met a lady that suggested that I needed to come with her on the next tour that she was going to be doing. So I said, okay, sure, never thinking she was actually going to contact me. And she did, and that particular tour was Justified Stripped. That was a Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake world tour.
Wow.
So that was my first large pop tour. From that pop tour, I met someone on that tour. Then she said the same thing, I need you to come with me on this tour that's coming up. So I said, okay, contact me, and she did contact me. That was the Britney Spears Hotel Onyx tour.
Wow.
From Britney Spears Hotel Onyx, I did the Backstreet Boys tour. From the Backstreet Boys, I did Cirque du Soleil. And then from Cirque du Soleil, I did the Madonna Sticky and Sweet World Tour.
Madonna too?
Yes. All while having a job on Broadway, because that's where my pension and everything else was. So I did 6 months on Broadway, 6 months on the road.
That's incredible. And you've been doing this for 24 years?
Yes.
And under the radar.
Under the radar.
And I feel like as much as I study theater and I'm in the know, I've never heard of you because of how we met. I'll just quickly say how we met. As you guys know, we have a super awesome, integrated IG page. And Michael's IG page, one of his pages, is The Great Black Way.
Yes.
And so he posts all this vintage Black Broadway stuff and footage and pictures, and it caught my attention, and I followed him. And then I think I came into your DMs and invited him to a show because I was coming into the city. And after that, we've kind of been best buddies, and all his stories and stuff and how long he's been in the business. Is just amazing that, even being in the business, you still don't hear about these iconic people that have, been holding the reins for, the newer generation, people like us to even come through. We've never even, heard of you.
Well, yes, that's true. And it's not that I think the people of previous generations have been doing less. It's just that we've never had the platforms that people today have. So we had to operate very differently. We had to operate in circles. If you were in a certain circle, then no one knew about you. And because of who we were, or who we are, or what we represented at that time, we were a lot of secrets. We were everyone's secret ingredients. We were the little elves that made things happen without really getting the notoriety, which is fine.
So when you say that, do you mean Black folk, or
yes.
do you mean costume people behind the stage, behind the scenes?
Well, no, because there are Black, not just Black costume people, but there are Black stage managers, there are other Black technicians, there are Black sound people, there are lighting people, there are lots of Black technicians that have been working all along on shows that everyone would know about if I were to mention them, but we never heard of them, or people have never heard of them because they were just the little secrets that came in to make sure these things could happen that could make sound better for certain black folks or could do certain things better than certain other people. But because of that, we were the little secret. So there were lots of times that, lots of instances where several people have tried to find a great white hope for Michael. Okay?
Yeah.
That didn't, I'm sorry if I touched the mic, that didn't really work. That didn't really work because of what I was bringing to the table. So no matter who they brought in to replace me or thinking they had someone to replace me, that never worked to their advantage because I knew what I was bringing to the table, just like a lot of people of my generation when we were working on Broadway or even off Broadway or regional theater. We knew we had to be twice as good.
Absolutely.
And on short notice, because you can always get in the door, that's not the problem. The problem is being present at the table when they throw things in your lap and being able to do it and shine.
Yeah, because from your stories, it seems like when you get on the tour, there's someone there and they say, now come with me on this tour. And generally, I feel like that's how theater kind of works, right? Where it's like you kind of get in the door with something, and then the thing that keeps you in the door are those relationships and showing up to your job and doing it well. And then you'll meet people, and then those people will say, come on with me to this next show. That's usually kind of how it works.
Definitely. And what I will say is, though one of my last degree was in costume design, because my first one was in fashion design, my next one was in pattern making technology, and my last one was in costume design. So when I started in costume design, I was meeting lots of designers and I was working with them on various shows, and eventually my sewing ability took off. I never had any idea that my sewing ability would take me as far as it's been. I've been around the world like 8 times because of that. And so I never really thought that would be what would keep me working this long. So of course I do shows, and there are lots of shows that I've done where my designs have been on stage. However, I was not the designer of record, so I cannot claim those garments.
But you do have one garment.
Oh,
that
yes.
is in somewhat really special. I really want you to share that.
Yes. Well, actually, that one garment is the garment that Patti LaBelle wore when she won her first Grammy, which I think was in '97 or '98. It is a black off-the-shoulder suit trimmed in mink, and that is in the new Smithsonian Museum as we speak.
Incredible. And where is this Smithsonian? Is that D.C., right?
That's in D.C., yes.
So we can go to the D.C. Smithsonian and see Michael's work.
Yes, it's the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Oh, the one we all want to go to anyway.
Yes, exactly,
That is like incredible to me. I'm like shell shocked, celebrity shocked by that. So when we go into credentials, because you just listed all these things you got degrees in, can you please tell us what schools you went to and which degree you got from that school?
Well, I started in FIT, and I will say I ended up in FIT. I finished in FIT. And of course, at that point, things were being farmed out. Things were not as specific as they are now because of at that time. So I took classes in several places, and so my degree was back at FIT, which now I'm also an adjunct professor at FIT as well. So
Wow.
FIT has been a big part of my life.
Congrats.
Thank you. So yeah, so it's pretty much my whole career, and my schooling has pretty much been central to New York.
So how many degrees do you have?
Well, actually, it's 2, but it could be 3 because I changed midway. But I had done all the years necessary for the degree, but I changed at the last minute and continued a degree.
So you have all the information, but you just don't have, I guess, like the different
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So I
that
have a
makes
degree in like pattern making technology.
Okay.
So I had done my 2 years of fashion design already.
sense. Okay.
But then before I got my degree in the last semester, I decided I was going to change my my specialty to pattern making. So I had done my 2 years in that and still did my 2 years in pattern making technology.
Okay. So do you think that for the newer up and coming costume design people, how would you say that school process has changed? And do you think that they even need to go to school in order to do what you do now, or is school just as important, and where you go to school is that important for them?
Well, I would say, of course, school is very important. I would never knock school. I would like to stress the fact that a lot of costume designers will spend several years getting a better or higher degree, of upper graduate degree. However, it doesn't improve their creativity at all. If you were not a good designer in undergrad, by spending 3 or 4 more years in school, it's not going to make you a better designer. You'll be a more informed designer.
That's the key. That's
but
the
it's
word.
not going to make you a better designer. If you're not creative and your creative juices are not flowing and you don't have them. Now that's not to say that it's not going to benefit you in the long run, because if you decide to start teaching later on in life, then you have those credentials in your pocket.
Right.
Okay?
So it's a backup plan.
It's a backup plan, definitely. But just to say, because I have an MFA in costume design, that the door is going to open for you. Because I also, in addition to belonging to 764, which is the wardrobe union.
That was the next question I was going to ask, was
right.
can you state your union?
I also belong to 829, which is the costume designers union, and the union that has all the creative aspects, creative designers involved in it. And most of the members of our union, even though we're working, there's a very heavy percentage that teach in addition to working, because on Broadway there are only like 40 theaters, but there are thousands of costume designers.
Right, right.
So there is that aspect. That's not to say you should not get education. You should always get your education, because it always helps, because if you have one thing that the person beside you doesn't have, then they'll probably look at you in a different light for that same position. So it always helps to have your education.
But then also, you know, like my other half of my team, Camilla states, you know, there's so much more theater happening outside of Broadway, right?
Yes.
So it's like, please travel, please do all different types of theater, because that's also where the jobs are at.
Definitely. Well, one thing that has happened as far as Broadway, because I work on Broadway, obviously, so that's why I emphasize that. But I've done a lot of theater outside of Broadway as well when the tours, the Broadway shows go out. So I'm aware of how that happens, even though they're not the designers of those particular shows that I've worked on. If there was a regional theater or a local theater in your area, then consider that. Just look into it to see exactly what it could do for you. And before you start throwing your credentials around and letting people know what you can do, just get in the door and see exactly where you could fit in with your skills. Instead of telling people what you can do and wearing it on your chest, just get in the door, and once they find out what you can do, and it comes as a surprise to them, then you become the golden child. If you come in and you say, I can do 10 things, they're going to want you to do 10 things all for the same amount of money.
Oh, that's good. That's good what you just said.
Right. So you don't you hold some things close to the chest. That's not to say don't make yourself unimportant, but that's not to say that you just put everything on the table right away.
Right.
Try to figure out where you can be important, because the one position you may apply for may not be the one you'll end up with and where your importance is going to be. Because their creativity may be in costume design, you could totally excel as a stage manager, because that's where your energy will be.
Managers.
So
Right.
theater is really an umbrella for a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's really an umbrella for a lot of things. You could really venture into a lot of things, because even after I stopped touring, because like I mentioned, Madonna was my last large tour, and I figured it wouldn't get any better than that.
Oh, yeah.
But since then, since I haven't been touring, because the people that the touring companies know or are familiar with me, whenever a show was coming into New York or the tri-state area, they would contact me to work on these particular productions.
Nice, yeah.
And so because of that, I have worked on Steven Tyler for American Idol. I've worked on the Black Eyed Peas. I did Gwen Stefani. I worked on the Mariah Carey Memories of an Imperfect Angel tour.
Mariah,
and like I mentioned, Anderson .Paak.
Yeah.
And I've also worked with Harry Styles of One Direction, formerly of One Direction.
Nice. You know, it's funny because of all you said. I remember hearing, or maybe seeing it on a social media post, but I think I heard it as well. They said that when you are trying to go for an opportunity, to ask them what you can do for them first, so that it adds value. And then as that relationship and rapport continues on, it gets more valuable. Then you start letting out the things that you're good at and what you can do and all that. So this is just like confirmation, you know.
Well, definitely, because the one thing how I perceive myself now is a lot of my friends will say, well, Michael, you have the credentials, so why are you not doing a show? Why are you not designing this? So-and-so is a designer. I have no problem with that, because I know as of right now, my sewing ability is what gives me a seat at the table. Yeah. Okay? And even though this designer that I work with, I'm not going to tell him or her that those colors are wrong or the length of that dress is wrong. That's not my position. That's not why I'm there. Right. I'm a team player. And because I'm a team player, I make this individual look good to the person they deem important. So because of that, they're always going to hire me. And with that in mind, I would like to give a special shout out to costume designer Ann Roth, who actually won the Tony Award for and the Oscar for Ma Rainey's. Because of her, I actually worked on, we probably have done 5 shows. Aside from the Book of Mormon, we've probably done anywhere between 5 and 8 shows together. I've worked on A Delicate Balance with Glenn Close. I've worked on Kinky Boots. I've worked on The Nance. I've worked on Fish in the Dark with Larry David. I worked on Raising the Sun with Denzel Washington.
Wow.
So because of...
How was Denzel?
He's cool. Okay. He's cool. I mean, Denzel, when it comes down to people like that, you always have to give them their moment and their space.
Yeah.
And so when they're ready to become... He's never mean or anything, but there are times he was in his element, like they all are. They're in their element and they need their space.
Because it was just this little swarm of social media stuff where everybody started coming out with their stories about Denzel and how he was just great big black man presence on set, and they were scaring, a lot of the white women. And I'm like, I don't think that's the whole story. I think we need the
even though that's not what this conversation is about, but
right.
We won't get into the white fragility on Broadway. That's another conversation.
It is. It is.
But yeah, so that's why I really consider myself a team player in the sense that I make someone else look important to the people they deem important. And because of that, that's why I've been able to work this long. Aside, my product is good as well.
Yeah, I really like how you say the ones that they deem important. I think that's a very, very important phrase to keep close, especially when you're in this business, because sometimes you can feel a little small in entertainment business, in conjuncture to the celebrities and the riches and the glitz and the glamour. But you just remember that you too are a person and you too have a job, right? Your job is just as important as their job. And in a lot of instances, if we don't have a Michael on set, we don't have a show. So I think it's really important to remember the backstage people, the front of the house people, all the people that help pull all that stuff together. It's really important to hear that term, the people that they deem important.
Well, at the same time, I wouldn't want to appear as though everything has been rosy. I mean, there are people that totally hate my presence. They don't want me there. Because also I'm not a hire I'm not going to say I'm a forced hire, but someone higher than the person that's directly over that department is the one that hired me. Mm-hmm. If I'm hired by the designer, she's over the wardrobe supervisor. So the wardrobe supervisor has to address and deal with me. So because of that, I get a lot of attitude coming from them. So there's always been, and then that's not even getting into the racial aspect of things, of having a black man show up to fit white women. That's another story.
That was going to be kind of my next question, because I wanted to ask about the hierarchy on set with who's at the top of the costume design all the way to, I guess, not the bottom, but, the worker bees, the fitters. Like, what is that hierarchy like? And also, how does race affect, where you're at in your hierarchy now, since you're 24 years in?
Well, getting back to your initial question, the costume designer is always at the top. The creative team is always at the top as far as clothing and costumes are concerned. Mm-hmm. Then from there, they will hire a wardrobe supervisor for the particular show.
So it's costume designer, wardrobe supervisor.
Right, in the costume department, not just in the theatrical makeup, because right. There are lots of people just in the wardrobe department, the costume and wardrobe area aspect. Costume designer, wardrobe supervisor. Then under the wardrobe supervisor, then comes their assistant. That's usually their assistant. And then it usually, the stitcher or the tailor, which is interesting also, that's another thing I'll bring up. The stitcher or the tailor, then there's always a laundry person, then there are dressers, which in television they're called costumers, but on Broadway they're called dressers. Or then there are day workers, which just come in during the day to prep the clothes for the show that evening. because every dresser that actually dresses the individual does not come in until maybe an hour before, which is like 6:30, to actually prep the show. But they don't really start steaming and pressing the clothes and putting on new soles on the shoes. All that's done in the morning, and that's why it's called day work, because they're there during the day to do that for the most part. Now, one other thing I want to mention as far as titles are concerned, in TV and film, the same position that I have, and I do the same thing, I'm called a tailor. Okay. In Broadway or Broadway-esque type shows, it's called a stitcher. Okay. So yes, some people have asked how demeaning is that, but that's just the way it's been it's the way it's just happened on Broadway in general, because of how the people that were hired initially to do the sewing aspect, which were stagehands' wives, so they really weren't technicians. They were really there to keep an eye on their husbands.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Right, so that's where that comes from. So that's where now with this people coming in that have degrees, not just in sewing, but in theater in general, that are working out. So that's why there's an issue with how the union perceives certain people coming in now, because people are skilled. At one point, there was just some lady that lived uptown that knew how to do hats. And that's what you went to. There are people now that have degrees in millinery. So it's a different arena now that Broadway has to reckon with, and Broadway has to reckon with many things right now, actually, but that's one of them as well.
Wow, that's so interesting. I didn't know that. So they were watching their husbands.
Yes.
Who would have thought?
Yes.
So
well, actually, maybe not. I'm not sure if it'd be your husband, but yes. But that's
right.
But that's getting back to the racial aspect of it also. Yes, when I started, I'm from New York, and I had no idea that the world or backstage really existed. Because coming from New York, even though I grew up with theater, well, my godmother was actually a showgirl in the Cotton Club and the Billy Rose Cotton Club and the Diamond Horseshoe.
Nice.
She was actually a showgirl. So she took me to a lot of, she was older, of course, at that point, but she took me to a lot of live shows, and I kind of grew up in the Apollo, so I got to see a lot of that. So theater was always a part of my life. But coming from New York, fashion is dominant. You know, there's Broadway, fashion really is dominant, especially when you're coming up or you're seeing all these costumes and clothes. So while I was in school, my instructors and my professors always told me my clothes were a little bit too theatrical.
Growing up.
Growing up, while I was in college. So I didn't really know what that meant, because I wasn't planning on going to Broadway. Then that's when celebrity styling happened, so I was able to kind of take that theatrical aspect of my clothing to celebrity. Nice. And then from celebrity, that's how I went to Broadway.
Interesting.
You know, so by the time I got to Broadway, I knew what I was offering already. I knew what I was there for. And even when I got there, I didn't kind of jump in and say, okay, I know how to do this. I went in, just as I mentioned before, day work, and I just looked around to see where I could be important. And when I saw some of the product that some of these people that were sewing, or the quote-unquote tailors, were turning out, then I realized, okay, I got this, I can do this. And that's because coming from fashion, which is a commerce, that's a business. Costumes are not really a business by themselves. Unless it's Halloween, no one runs to Macy's to buy a costume.
Sure.
Okay, so that's what. So where fashion is a business, when you're going to buy a garment, you'll look at the garment, because that character is already created. That character is you going into the store looking for something to embellish the character that already exists. Right. In costuming, the character is on a page. It's a script. So you're creating that backstory and that character. So that's the difference. One character exists that wants a dress, and one character, you can put them in anything you want because you're creating their backstory.
So as the stitcher, literally your job is to create a character.
Well, actually, my job is to create the costume for the character. The costume designer actually creates the visual aspect of what they want the character to look like.
Okay, gotcha.
So my job is to help the costume designer create that visual aspect to put on stage.
Are you ever the designer where you create the character as well?
Sure. Like I mentioned before, there's several instances where I have designed the costume that's on stage, but because I'm not the designer of record, I can't claim it.
Right. That now it all kind of makes sense.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because
so how was that for you?
Because in several instances, Because I'll do the fitting with an individual. And so I can hear them saying what they would like, what they don't like, or how they want this to fit, or whatever they want to do. And the costume designer may have a total different idea. So I can speak to the costume designer about several things that I've heard, but then again, there are times that they're very headstrong and they want it their way. So in the course of doing something, or doing this particular garment, I can finagle certain things for the sake of the run of the show, or the fit of the person. Because the costume designer will look at the garment and look at the fit, or tell me what they want, but it's my job to actually bring it to fruition.
Interesting.
So it's like you had mentioned previously, it's a roundabout way of doing something. So where you can't tell someone this is what has to happen, you have to present it as a question. What do you think if? Even though we know what the if was going to be,
Right.
you just can't say this needs to happen.
Do you think that things are changing now, where they're, I guess, making more room for those type of direct conversations to be had?
Yes and no. I will say it's not a time period, it's the individual designer, okay? And because there is such a comfort factor in being who they've always been, they do not want that comfort factor challenged. Now, there are lots of people that can challenge that comfort factor. I, as a black man, I can do it now, but early on, I wouldn't be able to do it. But now, because I do have credentials, and I can walk up to somebody that I'm working with, or even if I don't know them that well, we can have a conversation now. Whereas before, I couldn't. And that's not to say anyone else can have that conversation. But I would say if you are planning on having that conversation, be aware of where the conversation might go and how you may end up.
Okay, Michael, so let's get into, because Black Stage Everything over here, we think everybody deserves to get paid for their work. Like, I know it's common in the theater world to pay your dues and work for free and then work your network, but we don't feel like that. We feel like if you went to school for this thing, you're doing this thing, you're in the theaters, you've moved to New York, all these things, you should get paid for your work. So realistically over here, I always ask our guests about what the pay is like in their career field, and like some actual numbers, because I feel like a lot of the times, not only are there not like job boards for your type of work, we can't go on Indeed and type in Stitch, on Broadway, so we don't even know where to find these jobs. We don't know how much they pay, and the jobs require a lot from the person who's applying before they even get in the door. So I think it'll be really advantageous to give, our audience some type of numbers so that they can really see what's happening.
Well,
average numbers, of course.
Average numbers. Well, of course, Broadway, like most of New York, is union. So everything is unionized. So, of course, depending on which union you're in, there are levels, and I'm not sure what all the figures are, but there are levels of pay for certain things. Like for the wardrobe union, our pay, I think, is around $40 an hour. Okay? I believe that's what it is. Of course, it will be different once the pandemic finishes or settles, and then we can get our retroactive, things like that. Now, when it comes to costume design, your pay varies depending on really what you can get. Okay? There's a scale, okay, but there is a off-Broadway scale, there's a non-union scale, there are different scales of what you can get.
What about non-union? What do those look like? I know that's like all woven into
that's
everywhere.
That's totally whatever you can get.
Right.
Because that's why I've always said, when you're working non-union, it's always best to find out what's in their budget and how you divide the budget up. If they say you're working on a 10-person show and their budget is only $7,000, then that means once you take yours out, then that means you're only left with X amount of thousands for the show.
Right.
Okay, so then since it's non-union or off-Broadway, then how much of that wardrobe can the actors supply? Because you still have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to create whatever it is you have to do. So that's why I've always said you won't be making money early on, and you don't want to price yourself out of being on someone's short list. Okay, so that's why it's best to get in the door and then find out how you can make yourself more important once you figure out who the key players are. It's like a game of chess.
Yeah.
You have to strategize what you can do and how you can win this game. But if you stand on the outside and just say, I'm a winner, It doesn't make any difference.
True.
So that's why. So it's very difficult to say, give you a price point of what you want, what one should be asking for, because what I started making was very different from what I make on Broadway. Because working in fashion was very different from what I make on Broadway. Because when I was working in fashion a lot, which wasn't a very good weekly salary, however, when I was doing my styling, I could make a killing in 2 days. But I can't do that on Broadway. So am I going for the 2-day killing or for the 10-year tenure?
Yeah.
So
and only you know what's best for you at that point in your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, we all want to make quick money.
Right.
Okay. But then again, you don't always want to have to live on gig money either.
True.
You do want to have a salary somewhere.
I agree. Yeah.
Because it's nice to get a check every 2 weeks.
Yeah, it is.
As opposed to getting, $5,000 once every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's why. So it's very. I understand that everyone wants to work. Everyone wants their just due. I'm here. I've done the work, and so whatever you want to present.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't really expect anyone to readjust their game and their whole chessboard just because you've shown up. Because there are 10 people behind you
Yeah.
that are asking for less or will do it for less. That's not to say you should
Very true.
shortchange yourself.
Yeah.
But that's why I've always said, get your foot in the door and figure out how you can maneuver and make yourself more important. Because while you're asking for salary at that point, you're not really important to anybody.
Very true.
So figure out what they're offering. And negotiation is the way to go, if you can. Like on Broadway, when I work, I can't really negotiate. However, when I go on tour or when I do a Broadway tour and just do that, then I can negotiate.
Right. Okay.
So for instance, when I work on the show, if I'm doing early fittings, okay, that's that's creative. So that's coming out of the costume budget. Once the show opens and I go into the show, then that's coming out of the wardrobe budget.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm working with 2 different budgets. And wardrobe budget already has, they can have 10 people on their crew. For the creative team, which the budget's a lot larger, then I can charge them whatever I want because of what I'm bringing to the table.
Got it. Okay.
So that's why it's very difficult to give you figures, because I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed in my fashion career, to my career, all aspects of my trajectory. I've been very blessed. So there are times where I haven't made any real money to speak of. I mean, I look back at it now, and one of my students asked me if there was one thing you could change about your career, what would it be? I would ask for more money. Mm-hmm. That's not to say I would have got the job or had the career that I've had. Okay?
You would have asked.
I would have asked for it. But at the same time, sometimes you have to lure people in.
Yeah.
Like there was work that I've done initially for someone that I wasn't totally happy with the rate that even I chose to give them. However, I knew they were going to be very satisfied with my work. So the next time when they called me back, I just increased their price a little bit.
Yep.
And I just kept increasing it and increasing it because they knew what they were getting up front.
Yeah.
And that's why they called me back.
That's also smart.
Right.
Every time they call you,
you can increase your salary.
That works.
Because
I've
always felt that when you have a client, especially in styling, you take them to a new location without them realizing they've gone on a journey. It's like when you have a styling client, a rack of clothes. If your person likes to wear black, and you're tired of them wearing black, then you introduce their familiar styles in a new color.
Right.
You introduce, so you have to kind of finagle it. If they're familiar with black, then you give them new styles in black.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, but so they have their color, they're familiar with what they're going to look like in black. But now instead of doing a skinny pant, you're giving them a wide leg pant.
Yep.
So they can still kind of imagine themselves in that. And that's what I've always said when it comes to any kind of creative person. If it's a person reading a script or a person getting into a garment, don't watch them. Watch who they become.
Oh, that's good too.
Write
that down.
Look at them in the mirror. Watch who they become when they become that character. You'll see them arch their back. You'll see them straighten up. You'll see them pull their hair back. Whatever they're becoming, you're helping create that person.
Yeah.
So that's the secret to especially styling, because you could bring in a rack of 1,000 garments.
Yeah.
But until that person looks in that mirror and they become the person who the audience is paying to see,
Yeah.
that's when you become a winner.
Because you see the response.
Right, and
of
once
your
you
work.
become that
Yeah.
winner, and once they realize that, oh, I'm going someplace, I think I like what he or she is doing, then when the audience responds to this person that both of you have created, then all of a sudden they realize that I like what she has done. They love me, and they love me because of her.
Yeah.
So that means automatically you become a team player, even though you didn't intend to be.
Which is the magic of theater, I think.
Exactly.
For me.
Exactly.
Yeah, is that you have to work like in a team in this big collaboration
It's a
to
major
make this magic
collaboration.
happen.
It's a major collaboration.
Yeah, and everybody's job is important.
Yes.
Like if someone were to not have their job title anymore, something's going to sink. You know,
Yes.
it's really, really interesting
Yes.
how like theater works. What would you say for an entry level person into your job? You know, they got to come and pay their dues, right? What are some cool survival jobs or jobs that you've learned over the years that you can do in between projects to earn a living while you're still trying to make it in costume design or wardrobe or styling?
Well, one of the things I always suggest for my students especially in costuming, because it wasn't available to me, you know, when I was in my early phase, but as of right now, because we do have a social media that's unparalleled to anything that we've ever had before.
Very true.
And because there's so many outlets now, so if you go on your Craigslist or whatever platform you're on, and there is a position for a stylist or a designer or a script reader or an assistant or a PA or something like that, and even though the pay may not be good, if it fits in with your schedule, then you could look into it.
Yeah.
Because like we had mentioned before, it's all cyclical, it's all loops, it's all teams. So if this team that you're working with at the beginning, and it's a student maybe that's starting on a school project, and he graduates to something, he could become the next AD, assistant director of something.
Yeah.
But he remembers that you were able to help him with his vision when he was in school. So instead of him getting someone who he doesn't know, that doesn't understand what he does, you're automatically a part of his team now. So he's going to carry you along with him.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
part of starting it. And like on Broadway, for example, a lot of shows come in from off-Broadway,
Yeah.
but if you sign the right contract, then
can
you
go
have to
on
come with them.
Yep. Take your team with you.
Exactly.
That's the goal, yeah.
So that's the goal. So this way, so now when you were off Broadway or regional, or you were a supervisor of something, or you were an assistant, you know, whatever you were doing in this show in, let's say, Chicago somewhere, and now they're bringing it to Broadway. Well, you were already attached to that. You signed a contract. So this team that's coming to Broadway, they're very happy with you because you helped create this product that's now Broadway worthy. And they don't want to do it without you.
Yeah.
So this way you could actually say, okay, I'm a part of this.
And that's
So-
how you add value to yourself.
Right, and some people will try to get rid of you and say, well, okay, we don't really need her, we've achieved this already. However, if that's the case, that's fine because you already have the credit.
Yep.
So because a lot of what I've done, and a lot of people, when people read the resume, they were not my favorite jobs. However, it looks good on the resume. I remember when I went to an interview, I forgot what it was for, and one of the women was looking at my passport, and she's looking at it. In my passport, I have languages and stamps, I have no idea where they're from. But this woman was looking at my passport, and she says, "You've been to that part of Bermuda? I really want to go there." And I thought to myself, I really don't remember being there. I'm not sure I got a stamp from there, but that's what she saw.
Yeah.
Out of all the places in the world I've been, all the places I can't even pronounce, but she saw this one stamp from some island, and that's what she zeroed in on. And I'm saying that to say you never know who's watching you, or who's going to be observing you.
That's true. So true.
When I did Cirque du Soleil, I was actually a local that was hired, and I was pressing white shirts because someone didn't show up. I was just last minute, they asked me to come in. I hate pressing white shirts. I went to Catholic school. I hate pressing white shirts.
Yeah.
However, the supervisor at that point contacted me and said, "We really liked your energy on the previous leg of the show, of the tour. Would you come and join us for this leg of the tour?"
Wow.
And I was doing nothing but something I hated doing. But she thought I was in love with it, and she enjoyed my energy. But you took everything I had to even give up energy.
Yeah.
So like I said, you never know who's observing you. But then again, my foot was in the door.
Yes.
So they knew of my work ethic. So I think that's very important for any startup is to just get your foot in the door and not stay outside of the door screaming, this is what I want, let me in.
Yeah.
Because somebody else
What's
is going
that
to come in.
saying that you have?
Oh, the saying is, people will treat you how they meet you.
Yeah. Yes, and one time.
And I say that
That's
because
the best piece of advice ever.
I say that because when I work with various designers, and I'll just name Ann Roth again in particular, there are people that I had seen and had been in company of prior to my being seen with her. Once they saw me with her and how she was treating me and how we got along, all of a sudden it became, oh yes, Michael, how have you been? It's so good to see you again. When the last time you wouldn't even acknowledge my presence. So that's why I said it depends on how they meet you and who they respect and who you're with is how they'll treat you.
I agree.
Yes.
And I think that's for any industry.
Anybody.
Yeah, I
because
really do.
if they're popular, if they're comfortable with that person,
Yeah.
then they're going to be comfortable with you. And that's another thing I tell my students is, if you want to get to a Rihanna, you don't try to contact her.
Yeah.
You contact the two people that have her ear.
Y'all listen to this. Listen to
Because
this.
they're the ones that have her ear.
Yeah.
And if they tell her that they're comfortable with you, she trusts them, so she's going to be comfortable with you as well.
This is human psychology right here.
Well, it's a game of psychology, it really is. It's a game of psychology.
Yes, that's so true.
And at the same time, you don't want these other two people that have her ear to think that you want their job.
Yeah.
Because then you'll become a problem and they won't have you around.
It really is a delicate game
It's a game.
of
It's of chess. It's a game
yeah,
of chess. You
it
really
is.
have to be aware of the strategic moves that people around you are making. So it's definitely a game of chess.
This is good to me. I just have a couple more questions,
Sure.
and then I'll let you go. But one of the questions is, how has race informed your career for you? Because you started out a while ago, and in conjunction with that question is, do you think that a lot of the change that you see happening is because of what happened? I call it the civil rights movement, the second civil rights movement of my time that I know. Because of what happened last year, do you think that, all these things that are happening, because of it is happening because of that? Hopefully
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes, I understand.
Yes.
So yes, of course, race always plays a major part in
Yeah.
anything that we do as black people, okay? Now, the one aspect that I've encountered is the fact that as a black man, you get a 30-second soundbite to make your impression. Because after that, people will make their own impressions of you,
That's true. Yeah.
okay? So that's not to say you have to come in and buck dance and tap dance and everything. However, once you enter the room, you can sense the room and how they feel about you already. Now, I'm not a female, but as a woman, I think there's a different connection that you can make with women in general that men don't make.
Yes.
So I think there's always that variation in feelings within the room.
Because of toxic masculinity.
Yes, exactly, toxic masculinity. So there's lots of issues before you even get in the room
I agree.
about being a black man to come in the room.
I agree.
Now, as far as the black man that did come in the room and how I was embraced or appreciated, there were people that totally ignored me, did not want me there. They tried to get me fired at various points.
Wow.
And I think the reason why I was able to succeed, not just the work that I was putting out and the work level that I was doing, but I do think that it had a lot to do with the other black people that may have been in the interview arena at that particular point,
Yeah.
and who they felt comfortable enough with. Because it really boils down to their comfort factor, or well, not now as much, but still, yeah, I guess it does. It boils down to their
Still,
comfort factor
yeah.
with you, and how much your blackness offends them. Now, of course, as a black man, we all have to code switch, or we had to at one time,
Yeah.
to even get in the room. Now, the one thing that a lot of people got confused is a lot of black men especially, knew they were code switching, and they were doing it. So that's how you can come out of the room and just become a regular person from wherever you were from,
Right.
okay?
But then also some of our people kind of get offended or get upset with you when they do see you code switching, and that can be a problem too.
Well, it's a problem. Well, it wasn't really a problem until recently when there was a term for it. Okay, because we can look at any visuals or videos from way back when, from any actor, from Sidney Poitier to Harry Belafonte, and we knew how they would, what they had to do to get where they are.
Right.
That doesn't mean that's who they were.
Right.
That's meant who they had to become to get to where they wanted to be.
The double consciousness.
The double consciousness of it all.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I forgot the second part of your question, actually.
The second part was, do you think that a lot of the change that's happening now and within theater and Broadway is directly correlated from the civil rights movement of last year?
Well, yes, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do think the Black Lives Movement is the biggest thing since the civil rights of '64.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think a lot of what's happening now is related to that. I do think a lot of it, as of right now, is still very performative.
I do too.
Because people just have to check off boxes.
Yeah.
So they're checking off boxes and putting black folks at the table and to say, oh, look who we have. We have one, we did so-and-so. Shouldn't you be happy? So-and-so's here. However, if the gatekeepers are still the same, we still are not in decision-making process, and we can still not make decisions.
And that's the key.
Right.
Who holds
Exactly.
the key?
Exactly.
And that's why I talk a lot about theater and company management now, because I'm like, we as Black folk know that we're talented.
Yes.
We were born with these things, but now we need to also move into owning. We need to try to figure out how we're going to have our first Black Broadway theater owner, right? Like, how are we going to have the first Black Broadway company management company, you know what I mean? Like, when are we going to have those things? And in 2021, why are we still having the first, right? But we got to get somewhere. And so now I'm like, we know that we are writers and performers and directors and all, and even now we're getting a lot more into producing and things like that. But I really still think that we have some way to go with owning a lot of our craft, because like you said, we don't hold the key. And so even in music, you know, people have to buy their masters or like get their masters and stuff back. And I think in theater, we just don't have any ownership of any of it.
Well, actually, excuse me, I think we had more when we had less. Because there were Black theater owners in the 40s and the 30s, they did exist. That's why how the whole Chitlin circuit became what it was, because they did exist, okay?
Right.
So I think once we were able to diversify and incorporate ourselves into certain arenas, then those houses became less important, because a lot of performers didn't want to perform for just Black audiences anymore, because they wanted to branch out. And by doing that, there was not really a market anymore or performers to go to these certain houses that these Black entertainers, these Black people owned.
Interesting.
And so that's why, not saying that's the only reason, because once the Depression hit, of course, it became very difficult to keep your houses open.
Right.
However, if you had to perform at a Black theater, as opposed to going on a European tour or another tour with a white promoter that was going to get you third billing on a white show, then of course that's what the performer was going to go with.
Of course, yeah.
So they did exist at one point, but also at that, there's the whole story, the entire story about which current day theater owners actually did some unsavory things to make sure they would get certain theaters when they closed. So, because now I think Broadway's owned by maybe 5 people.
Yeah.
Okay? And that didn't just happen.
Of course, yeah.
That was definitely thought out and maneuvered, and that's how that happened. So now, if there are theaters that aren't really that popular, and so there are certain theaters that pretty much are available quite frequently. So now I feel that if there was a Black organization of some sort that wanted to rent that theater out for months at a time, for 6 months out of a year, then I think that's a way to get into the ownership or the co-ownership of a theater. Because they're definitely willing to, certain theaters that haven't really been doing that well, they're definitely willing, I can imagine they're willing to at least have co-ownership, because as of right now, in Broadway, the Times Square Church, which is on 52nd Street and Broadway, I believe, used to be the Mark Hellinger Theater. That was actually a theater at one point that they sold.
History, yeah.
And now it's a church. So if the theater's not doing that well, and they think they can still make money on it by being a co-owner, then I'm sure they're willing to, I can't say I'm sure, I'm not a theater owner, but I can't imagine they would not be willing to make money on it and have their house sit empty for 6 months. Because theater owners are a very special breed in the sense that they're going to get theirs no matter what. So you have to incorporate them into the mix as opposed to trying to do it without them, because they do own Broadway.
Interesting. So you're saying if you're going into management, think of it as co-ownership.
Yes.
First.
Yes. Yes.
That's good.
Because
that's good.
They have the market, they have the arena,
Yeah.
they have everything in their hands. So you can't try to get it out of their grasp. You can only join them in their grasp. And they're only going to let you grab it, but so tight until
That's
they realize
genius.
that, okay, so if I let this go, I can still make a living. I can still make money on this end without my putting as much of myself into it. I can let somebody else handle it and just get what I call mail money. The money just comes in your account. You're not doing anything for it.
So we're back to the game of chess.
We're back to the game of
because
chess.
Because you're making it think that it's their idea.
Exactly.
When it's been your strategy all along.
It's your strategy all along. Yes.
Is this the history? See, it's psychology for me. I love it here. Like I feel like I'm learning so much about not just about ways that we can move in theater, but just in life, right? Like how people perceive you. It's really important to plan and to strategize the moves that you make, to get maximum outcome. And I think a lot of what you're talking about, specifically towards what we have to go through, as Black folks, that's exactly what we have to do to succeed. We got to have a plan.
You've got to have
in
a
this
plan.
thing. I've learned as being, I call myself also a baby entrepreneur as well as a baby playwright, but being a baby entrepreneur, I'm like, planning is everything. Like if I don't have a plan, if I don't have a mission, if I don't have a vision and a purpose, I don't know what I'm doing, and there's no way that I can figure out how to make money from it. But once you get clear on those things and you make that plan and you make that strategy, things happen.
Definitely. And another word that's been thrown about a lot in the last year and a half is branding.
Branding, yeah. Everyone's a brand now.
Everyone's a brand. Well, of course, that will fall by the wayside very soon, because a lot of the term branding means something different to a lot of people, and the sense that because it's a trendy term, everyone wants to be a brand.
Yeah.
However, if you're going to really pursue your brand, and your brand is going to follow you, and you're able to call on your brand when you have a product, and not just a pair of paint-splattered denim jeans, but a product, then they will follow you. So if you can present to any theater owner or theater organization that your piece is important because your people, your brand, your people that follow you are willing to look at it, and they could possibly sell your followers tickets to your show, then that's sales already.
True.
So it's really a trickle-down theory, and there's so many more ways to approach things now that weren't there before.
True. Chess.
It's chess.
It is chess.
It's chess, definitely.
I have one last question.
Sure.
I'm just learning so much. I love talking with Michael because we can be sitting at a random cafe and we can just be talking about theater, and it'll just go on and on and on, and I'll learn so much and hear all of these stories, and it helps grounds me in what I do. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you for having
that.
me. Thank you.
And I just want to ask for the future stitchers and costume designers and wardrobe people that's out there. You've been giving them this whole time. If y'all wasn't listening, he's been giving y'all gems out the gate. But just to bring it kind of all together, what are some tips or advice you would give to the aspiring, I call it theater clothes people, that are coming in, should they try to get a union? I don't know if you guys have heard about how AEA has open access now.
Yes.
And if you've had any type of professional experience and you can prove it with like check stubs, they will let you in the union and things like that, which has been a little controversial. I feel like I'll do a video about it later. But I feel like with all these different avenues and ways of getting into the business, what are some tips and advice that you have for them?
Well, of course, I only belong to unions specific to my work.
Yeah.
But what I keep referring back to my students, or when I have seminars, or when I have a speaking engagement, and people ask me about how they should approach certain things, and I will let them know that if you're going into wardrobe does not care about your costume design, because one's creative and one isn't. And so the person you're speaking to may be a frustrated costume designer that's now in wardrobe. So if you're presenting yourself as a costume designer, you won't get hired because, one, they don't think you'll have allegiance to that position. And two, why would they hire you if you were more successful than they were? So you have to kind of alter your resume. You can have I have 3 or 4, well, I don't really use them anymore, but I had 3 or 4 resumes depending on the job I was going for. Like at one point I had a fashion resume, then I had my celebrity resume, then I had my Broadway resume, because Broadway was not really concerned with fashion or my celebrity. Now they're all on one resume.
Yeah.
But so that's why you have to alter your resume to really fit the position, because there's things that you might do, and like say for like people that have dressed a show in college, let's say, and they didn't really have any much experience dressing, or maybe they weren't even dressing, they were on the sidelines, zipping up clothes before they ran on stage. There's a way to reword that to make it seem like you were a dresser, without lying, to make it seem like you were a dresser on that show, if that's the position you're going for. Because wording is very important, because now we have, at one point your resume went directly to the person you might be working with. Now you have to go through 3 people and 3 interviews and projects and several things. So
Sure.
Once again, get in the door. Make your resume impressive enough to get in the door. Now you don't want to overdo it and make it seem like you can't, once you get in the door, you can't really produce anything that's on your resume. So that's why I've always said don't overshoot it, but make it creative enough that it's going to impress somebody without stepping on anybody's toes and them thinking you want that job.
You heard it here. This is period. He telling y'all life stuff. I don't care who you are watching. This is for any industry. This is how people think. This is how they work. This is how they act. So, Michael, I just want to tell you thank you.
Well, thank you.
And BSE, Black Stage Everything, thank you so much for coming on here and talking about your experiences and giving some love to theater folks, and actually for just existing. Let's just say that, because you're fabulous.
Well, thank you.
But in your work speaks for itself, right? But also just, being a beacon of, how we can grow our careers in this industry. I feel like so many times we're not able to see the people that we're trying to become, right? And so I think that you are that person in real time. And I think that for a lot of I like to say theater closed people, right? They're gonna see this and you're gonna be a beacon of hope for them. And that's all I was trying to do here with BSE Talks, was create that. So I just, thank you to my dear friend Michael Harrell for coming on here. And we want to give you your flowers while you're still here.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.